Shapiro used to work for a guy called John Brennan, who was the director of the CIA. And so I thought, okay, I'll call up John Brennan and ask him about Nick Shapiro. If anyone knows what Nick Shapiro can do and who he is, it would be him.
Hi and welcome to Flawsome Talk. I'm Kjersti Flo, and here on my channel I talk about my good and bad experiences in Hollywood and working as an entertainment reporter. So today I have a very special guest with me who's also a journalist. He's worked in traditional media for over 20 years and now he started his own thing. It's called breakermedia.com, where he writes articles and have newsletters, and they also have a podcast here on YouTube. I will leave links below so you can find him there. Ravi has been reporting on serious stuff before for Gawker, New York Times. He works for Vice on HBO, and he's even been a mentor at Columbia Journalism School. What made me interested in talking to him was that he did a deep dive into Nick Shapiro and what he calls scandal PR. He wanted to find out what Nick Shapiro can actually do. He calls him the Kaiser Soze of the internet. Remember Kevin Spacey in The Usual Suspects? Because he tried to find out things about him to see how difficult it was if Nick Shapiro actually exists out there. So he's going to tell you everything that he found out. Here is Ravi. Hi, Ravi from Breaker. You kind of just started this this newsletter podcast. Could you talk a little bit about what Breaker is?
Hi, Kjersti. I'm very proud I can pronounce your name correctly because my wife is Scandinavian, so I want to show off my skills in the
very good, very good.
Thank you. Breaker is a publication that covers everything that comes through Manhattan. So it's like money, scandal, power, celebrity, media, fashion, art, weird things. Essentially, it's just stuff we find really interesting and stuff we feel like isn't being covered in the way that we would hope it was covered. You know, our heroes are things like Spy Magazine or Vanity Fair way back when they would, really dig into something that was in the culture in like a deep journalistic way. And without being as sniffy as I think some mainstream journalists can be about certain topics, which is kind of how we came to Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, which, as you know, because you're right at the center of it, is a huge story, and which has a very strange relationship to sort of traditional media.
Yeah, you did a very interesting piece that made me want to talk to you here today, because you wrote a story about scandal PR. You're not even calling it crisis PR anymore. You're calling it scandal PR. So what is scandal PR?
So crisis PR is, as you know, a field which has been around for a very long time. And to me, it's kind of a traditional thing now. And it's something that especially big corporations used to hire people for occasionally. They'd run across a crisis every 4 or 5 years. They'd have a guy, they'd call him in. They'd have a lot of meetings in conference rooms. They would set a strategy. The crisis PR person would prepare them for one big TV interview, and they would all move on with their lives. Scandal PR, which is a phrase my partner Lachlan coined, it's a slightly different thing. I feel like we live in an era of constant scandal. I feel like if you're in the public eye, if you're a corporation, you're going to have to deal with this stuff, once a month, 3 times a year, 4 times a year. So there's a new breed of people who specialize in dealing with these scandals. And a big facet of their work, as you're more aware than anyone, is what's online. The YouTube and Reddit to me are the internet, and they drive public opinion. And I think that, kind of what you might term the big world, the corporations and the celebrities are kind of coming to terms with this now. And they're hiring people like Nick Shapiro or Risa Heller, who we mentioned in our story, to kind of help them navigate this stuff. And what we found is it's a really, really murky world out there. I went into it with many years of experience with PR people calling and shouting at me, with dealing with celebrities, with dealing with prominent people. And often the answers to the questions when you ask really straightforward questions like, can you edit someone's Wikipedia in a negative way?
Sorry, exactly we know that now.
Policies for dealing with Instagram accounts. So it's like, it's all murky, it's all strange, and it's in our stories, we love diving into really strange worlds, and we found this to be a really fun and strange world.
So did you find out anything about Nick Shapiro? I feel like his online presence is very vague, I guess you could say.
That's one word for it. I mean, non-existent is another word. So you know, in our piece, we refer to him as kind of the Kaiser Soze of the internet, because by repute and by what this man is capable of doing, if you read and watch everything, you know, he's a very murky, nefarious figure. And kind of what started me on the path of reporting the story is I looked at his LinkedIn and I thought, I think this might just be a guy, you know, like a DC guy. And that does not preclude his doing dark or nefarious things. And as I said, it's really difficult to navigate in this world. So I just thought I'll start pulling on the thread and see what happens. And what we roughly found is, you know, you can do this stuff. Like, it's possible to pay off Wikipedia editors. It's possible to use influence at places like YouTube or Instagram. It's just not easy. And it didn't seem likely to us that Nick Shapiro in particular was doing all of this stuff. But then again, it wouldn't seem likely to us, would it? Otherwise, there would be no function in doing this stuff. You know, one of the people we spoke to pointed out that if you could do any of this stuff, you wouldn't say you could do any of this stuff.
Good point.
You know, and I think that, you know, also in the course of this story, Shapiro used to work for a guy called John Brennan, who was the director of the CIA. And so I thought, okay, I'll call up John Brennan and ask him about Nick Shapiro. If anyone knows what Nick Shapiro can do and who he is, it would be him, his boss, maybe his mentor to some extent. And so we asked someone to do what's called a public records search. Do you know what those are?
The public records?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can do a public records search, and it's just like, you know, if someone's got a mortgage or a cell phone or a driver's license or has ever had a speeding fine, all that stuff is in public records. And you can pull a search on someone. And there's basically nobody who's never run across one of those situations in their lives. But John Brennan, no records, nothing. And so this stuff is possible in some weird, strange way that it's very difficult to understand. And so fundamentally, the thing that I came out of it thinking was, as you well know, a fundamental argument of Blake Lively's case is, well, Justin Baldoni's PR team and Jed Wallace have all these tools for manipulating public opinion, and they use them to enact retribution on Blake Lively for the difficulties on the set of It Ends With Us. And they firmly believe that Jed Wallace and Baldoni's PR team, they have these capabilities. But if you ask them if they have these capabilities, they say, that's outrageous. Of course we don't have these abilities. Nobody has these abilities. And, you know, when I raise that contradiction, it's just not possible for them to grasp the notion that either everyone can do this stuff or no one can do this stuff. It can't really be both.
So from your opinion, doing all this research now, you think that alleged smear campaign didn't happen? Or would you say?
The alleged
smear campaign that Blake Lively is accusing Justin Baldoni of. She's saying, like, you know, we're just talking about how they can do these things, and she's alleging him of this smear campaign. She said that he's the reason why she has a bad reputation, basically blaming everything on him for pushing forward a negative narrative about her. So you're saying that?
Well, look, I can't say for sure what happened. You know, I wasn't there. I wasn't in any of those rooms. No one has given me an account which I feel like is definitive. I would say it's more plausible, just looking at it, that people just didn't like Blake Lively in that moment. You know, there's two kind of competing accounts. One is, okay, a lot of people kind of did not like the way this lady was presenting herself. They were fans of the book. They didn't feel like she was doing honor to the book. They didn't believe her accounts of what happened on set, and they were negative about that on the internet. And the alternative to that is there are people with dark, nefarious powers who can manipulate public opinion. You know, using a dial, they can turn it pro, anti. And one of those things seems much more plausible to me than the other. Now, if we dug into Nick Shapiro and we found, hey, this guy can do these things, the CIA can manipulate opinion online, maybe it would cut both ways. Maybe if he can do it, she can do it. It seems more plausible to me that maybe people try. Actually, one thing we heard is, in Hollywood, in a moment of crisis, as you might know, Sheshti, because you've prompted a few crises in Hollywood, people tend to get very, very panicked. They're in a very controlled world, you know? Everything is controlled. They get the brand of water they want. They get the temperature just right. You know, you've done these junkets before, and you know there's someone sat right here, and if you ask a question they don't like, your interview is over. And so these very, very controlled environments. And they go out into this world, this kind of wild west of internet public opinion, and they're lost and they're scared. And they will hire someone who makes a claim that they can do this stuff. From what we found, Shapiro is not actually making that claim, but they will hire someone who can come into a room and say, don't worry, I've got it. I have a way. Don't worry about it. And they give you a wink, and that makes them feel better. And so I think to some extent we're living in the fantasy of a Hollywood A-lister about what's possible when they want to crack the whip.
But I think you said somewhere in the article, you said that he's planted stories involving Casey Anthony, Hailey Bieber, and Meghan Markle in an effort to desurface Lively. So that's another way of working, I assume, that you will, create a lot of attention around others. So you will bury the person that's getting the negative attention.
Well, in the story, I wrote it that way because I was saying what he'd been accused of. It's not my estimation that he's actually done those particular things, or rather, there's no way to really know. I mean, one person we spoke to did point out that it's just much easier to build a relationship with someone like you, to build a relationship with someone who has a big following on Reddit, just like you would have built a relationship with a journalist at a mainstream media organization 20 years ago, than it is to seed all these stories and plant all these bots and do all that stuff, not least because what you're doing is creating a larger scandal again. I think what we found in the end was it is incredibly murky and all the stuff is really possible. It's not totally beyond the realms of possibility that any of this stuff occurred. It's quite difficult to believe that one person could be capable of everything Shapiro is accused of.
I think, from my perspective here, I think that hiring someone like that just proves that you really want to do something murky, because otherwise, why would you have hire someone with those kind of connections? Either it's like a scare tactic, like, hey, we got CIA on our side here, or it's just like, it's very revealing of the length they're willing to go to, because why do you need the CIA to clear up your reputation? For me, I think you're a journalist as well. Don't you think Blake Lively should just have gone out and just done an interview that could have just completely saved her?
Well, look, I don't know if you do this, but I sometimes do sort of fantasy PR for people who I see in the public spotlight. Look, if it had been me, I would have said this was an incredibly fraught, difficult moment for me on this set. And it spilled out into the public in a way that I didn't really want it to. And we're going to pull back and kind of figure things out and plot a path forward. And you're right, one grid interview would have done it. But I think in those moments, people aren't thinking straight in that way exactly. And I do think that psychologically it is quite revealing, because she chose a legal team that was based in Washington, D.C. She chose a guy like Nick Shapiro. These are people who are very connected to sort of international diplomacy. And what Shapiro did at the CIA was not in any way operational. He was a deputy chief of staff. And what that means, as far as I could ascertain from my reporting, is, he's kind of making sure that all the wheels in the agency are moving. He's almost working directly for the director, setting up meetings, being the first person in the room before the meeting, the last person in the room after the meeting. I mean, it's a bit derogatory to call him kind of a secretary, but it's a very functional role. He's not in any sense in the field doing the work we would consider spy work. But the question is, does Blake Lively know that? I don't know.
Don't tell her.
I can't help but suspect that part of the appeal of hiring people like Gottlieb or Shapiro was their connections into a very big, very important feeling diplomatic world. And you're right. Look, if you read those filings, it doesn't seem like the intentions were just to push the truth unvarnished and get to the bottom of something. It felt like, a war was being started.
So what do you think now, when you look at a lot of the traditional media is kind of writing biased Blake Lively stories still and supporting her? Why do you think that is? Because I find it a little bit surprising. I've been interviewed for so many pieces lately. I mean, a lot of people want to make it political. But I just find it very interesting to see how it's so leaning towards her, which for me is like you are supporting the person in power here, the celebrity, the star, the rich and famous people. Is it just because she's a woman? What do you think?
Look, I think I learned a particular kind of journalism, which maybe you did too. I don't know, where you just look at the story and you follow it where it goes, and that to me is a wonderful freedom and a beautiful, beautiful thing. I always have this line that the most basic form of justice is to have your story honestly told. It doesn't have to be told to your advantage, doesn't have to be told against you, just honestly told. And I think that there are wonderful reporters everywhere. There are wonderful reporters at the New York Times. There are wonderful reporters at every outlet. But just to generalize, I would say that in the last few years, it did become very, very political. It became very, very politicized. There was a right way to view the world and a wrong way to view the world. And journalists, by and large, saw themselves as kind of campaigners for a certain worldview. And the Me Too movement, of course, began in the traditional media. And I think it sort of really captured a particular moment around 2016, 2017 and onwards. And I think the world has moved on now. And we're aware that these stories are more nuanced. There's more to them. It's certainly worth looking twice at them. It's certainly worth applying skepticism in the way that we ordinarily would. Not more skepticism, but the sort of ordinary quantity of skepticism. And my opinion is these newsrooms just kind of got left behind. They haven't got their feet in the modern world. They can't understand that people like you or people on YouTube elsewhere on YouTube or on Reddit, they're really doing great work. They're digging into stuff in a really deep and thoughtful way. It's adding a lot of nuance. It's adding a lot of debate. And so I think it's just to some extent being old fashioned. But honestly, I have the same view as you. I look at some of these stories and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I don't know what it seems, because you know what the truth is, it's more interesting to dig into all the facets of it. It's more interesting to say, I don't know before you start, than it's definitely this way. And so it baffles me.
Were you surprised? I mean, if you know this story, that I was mentioned in the New York Times in the article, and I had nothing to do with it. Were you surprised about that type of reporting from the New York Times?
Look, the New York Times is a big place. I worked there for a long time. I learned some wonderful things. As I said, there are some wonderful reporters there. I mean, they hold themselves to a standard of journalism that's basically impossible for anyone to live up to. So in a sense, I'm not surprised that they sometimes don't live up to it. Like the particular part that mentioned you, I would definitely not have put it in a story. I can put it that way. Like I would not have included it that way. It felt like it was an inference without any supporting evidence, and that doesn't make me comfortable. How did you feel when you read your name in that story?
I was shocked. I was really shocked. And especially the fact that they never contacted me for a comment or to even ask me if it was true. And then I saw the filings for the dismissal of Justin Baldoni's lawsuit. I saw that they contacted all the PR people that was involved asking about me and that video. So everyone else was asked about it, and everyone else got an opportunity to respond to the article except for me. And that was like, to me, and I contacted them and they were like, yeah, okay, we can add a statement 24 hours later, which to me was like, damage was done already. It was horrible because, everyone thought they believed everything in that article. So of course they thought that I was involved. And it was, I got a lot of backlash from it. And they never apologized. You know how it is in this country. Everything is a liability. No one wants to take responsibility for anything. So, yeah, I wish they would have said something. It would have, just said it to me in private, whatever. Just like say, we're sorry about that. Because that was just like outrageous, I think. So bad. Such sloppy journalism. And
well,
yeah.
a lot of people say that you would have a legal case, but it seems like you don't want to pursue that.
Oh, yeah, no, that's going to take, you know how it is with these things in this country. Do I really want to fight New York Times for 2 years? And then, defamation is really hard to prove. And, I think people now at this point, they know that I had nothing to do with it. And that's all that I care about. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. But anyways,
well,
do you have any?
It's you have as a person at a major news outlet who's writing about people who don't have a major news outlet behind them, like you have an enormous responsibility, I think, because you have all the power in that situation. And so, it surprises me that you weren't reached out to if you were named in the story. I can say that.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see. Do you have anything else that you found interesting about this story that you want to mention?
The one thing that I might dig into further is that many people have told me that Wikipedia is quite vulnerable. Like that there are ways of messing around with people's Wikipedia pages. Actually, it didn't make the story, but we looked into your Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
And we found basically that everyone is dodgy.
Really?
Yeah, I forget there were two names, and one you had seen as kind of broadly making positive changes on your page, and one you had seen as broadly making negative changes on your page. Is that right?
That could be. I gave up after a while. I think it was like a 50 to 100 changes every day. I was like, this is insane. It's just living its own life now, and people are fighting over it. I did get in touch with, or he contacted me, the guy who created my original Wikipedia page, that they, for some reason, they blocked him from editing anymore, which I thought also was very dodgy. And I thought it was dodgy that this guy on Reddit, no, on Substack, who wrote an article about my Wikipedia page that he thought it was suspicious. And I was like, what's suspicious about it? It's just a regular Wikipedia page that someone wrote. And it just had my, it was nothing on there was factually wrong or anything. It was just a nice page about my achievements as a journalist. And then all of a sudden, it's this like crazy war zone on my Wikipedia. So you found that a lot of people were dodgy there. Interesting.
Yeah, well, you know what? If you dig into it and you look at who these editors are, and I think Wikipedia is one of the miracles of the modern world. I think it's an incredible thing. So I don't mean to disparage Wikipedia editors, and I'm sure that most of them are fabulous. But if you dig into it, you're just like, for the level of information power these people have, it seems strange. Some are PR adjacent, some are in that world. I've heard only rumors, and this is nothing specifically about anyone who's edited your page, but I've heard rumors that you can buy a Wikipedia editor if you know where to look. And so I think that's an arena that we're going to be digging into further. But again, I'm very curious how you feel being at the center of these online wars. You're just you're sat there in your apartment and you're going about your business every day, and suddenly people are writing articles and kind of pushing, I guess, a version of conspiracies about you.
I know it's a little frustrating, but then at the same time, it gives me a lot of freedom because I can talk about it directly to people. If you don't have any social media, or, if you can't go out there and defend yourself against these things, it it can be frustrating. And I've seen, some other creators out there that don't like me. They will create videos just about me and trying to discredit me and those kind of things. I haven't experienced anything like that before. And that's like, oh, it's a kind of an icky feeling when that happens, and you want to go out and say, that's not true. But so I get a little bit of taste of what celebrity life is like, when people have opinions about you out there and it's out of your control, talking about, controlling your image and all that stuff. But you just have to like brush it off and let it go. And I think that's just something that you just get used to.
And what while I have more questions for you, what do you want to see from mainstream journalists? I wouldn't describe myself as mainstream, but definitely traditional. I do believe that no one is ever totally right, nothing is ever simple, and no one's all good or all bad. And so if you want to see that as traditional, it is. And I'm just wondering, what do you want from traditional journalists? What would you like us to do?
I still see myself as a traditional journalist as well, actually. No, I mean, the thing is, the problem here in the US is that people don't trust the media. In Norway, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in Norway, people trust the media. They trust journalists. It depends on what outlets you're from, obviously, but people trust what they read. And here, that's not the case anymore. And I think it's a very dangerous path. But when I experienced that with the New York Times, that really, that I was so disappointed in that. And because that makes me not trust journalism here as well, which I did. So for me, that was kind of a wake-up call. And I'm like, okay, now I see where things are coming from here when people are saying they don't trust traditional media or mainstream media, as they call it. But I think journalism is so important. And, having seen what's happening to journalism now, that, it's almost impossible to make a living, especially from being a freelance journalist. That's impossible. So if that kind of journalism, like, deep digging journalism, investigating journalism disappears, that's a really scary thing to even think about. So I hope it doesn't. I think it's just taking new forms. Like you did. You started your own thing, and like I'm doing now, I'm starting my own thing as well. So I think that's what we're going to see probably more and more of.
I think that
But
makes
then,
perfect sense. And I mean, that's how I look at the world now. I don't look at whole outlets and say, look, I get my news from X, Y, or Z outlet. I look at particular writers or journalists who I've come to trust because I know that their information is accurate. So I guess we're all going to look for voices like that. And in some sense, those voices are the anti-scandal PR people. They're on the good side of the ledger, spinning real information back into it. So let's both keep doing that.
let's do it. Thank you so much for joining, and let everyone know where they can find you guys and where they can find your podcast and your website.
So you can go to breakermedia.com where you can sign up for free, or you can subscribe if you're feeling generous. Subscriptions also make wonderful gifts for people. And you can find us on YouTube at Breaker Media NYC.
Perfect. And I will link below the podcast and everything there as well, so people can come and find you. Thank you so much, Ravi. This was so interesting. It's great to talk to another journalist. I interviewed so many creators on YouTube, but we think a little bit differently. But it's really great to talk to you, and I can't wait to read more about you, or digging into all the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, Ryan Reynolds, crazy world.
Likewise. And look, I feel like one of the great joys of being a journalist in this brave new world, as you are and I am, is we kind of band together and we create little communities. And I think it's wonderful. It feels like an old newsroom used to feel, all the best parts of that. I also have to say that my wife is going to be really excited because she's a huge fan of yours. So I'm going to just wait.
Oh, that's so nice. Say hi from me, and thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day. And yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much to Ravi for being here on Flawsome Talk. I hope you learned something. I did. And yeah, thanks for your support, you guys, and keep sending me tips. I really enjoy reading through them and getting to know all of you a little bit better. So thank you so much for that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss an episode of Flawsome Talk. And I'll see you in my next episode. Bye.